entrepreneurs who shared their stories. Now we're going to be moving on to our next featured panel on the 3Cs initiative. Launched approximately 5 years ago, the 3Cs initiative unites 12 European Union countries from the Baltic, Adriatic, and Black Sea regions in a coordinated effort to develop the area's energy, transport, and digital infrastructure. With potential projects totaling more than 570 billion euros, the initiative has the chance to dramatically increase the region's role in Europe's economy and the world. To help us understand the initiative and what it means for Latvia and the Baltic region, we've invited a panel of 4 experts to share their insights. But before I invite them to speak, let's take a look at this brief video about the initiative.
From Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, an iron curtain has descended across the continent. Since Churchill made that speech, the world has changed dramatically, especially here between the Baltic, the Adriatic, and also the Black Sea, where a new partnership has descended known as the 3Cs initiative. The 3Cs is made up of diverse EU member states. Their stories are unique, but they all have one chapter in common. For half a century, they were closed off from the rest of Europe by the Iron Curtain. We can still see the effect of that today. While Western European nations are deeply intertwined through energy and transport links, the nations of the 3Cs remain relatively disconnected from each other. But we are now writing a new chapter together in which millions will benefit from new investments and smarter connectivity. In fact, the 3Cs region has already become a driving force for economic growth in Europe, outperforming the EU average by 67% over recent years. To turbocharge that growth, the 3Cs is now combining its political will and economic might to significantly improve its energy, transport, and digital infrastructure. Their focus is on smart connectivity to create new opportunities for future innovations. That includes improving data exchange to make more efficient use of information. By taking decisive action now, the 3Cs will continue to drive economic growth in Europe and strengthen both our competitiveness and our relationships across the world in this chapter and beyond.
With that as an introduction, let's turn now to our 4 panelists, and I'll turn first to Mr. Andris Pelš, who is State Secretary of Latvia's Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Mr. Pelš has more than 20 years' experience in the Foreign Ministry, having served in posts focused on defense, NATO, the United Nations in New York City, and the European Union. To offer his perspective on why the 3Cs initiative is important to Latvia, let's now turn to Mr. Pelš, please, sir. I believe,
the video.
Yeah. Okay, we can hear you now.
You can hear me now. Excellent. So you all saw the video, and it was pretty self-explanatory. Why is this important to Latvia? First, we have to recognize that the political changes in the region have greatly outpaced the infrastructure development in the Central and Eastern European region, including the Baltic countries and also Latvia. As we have all seen and are familiar with, most of the infrastructure dates from the Soviet times, and also large parts of that are directed on east-west axis. Obviously, we need infrastructure and connectivity in countries, well, in separate countries and across the region. We need energy solutions. We need new digital infrastructure, and all of these avenues are of strategic importance both to individual countries and to region as such. Of course, the European Union countries have the EU convergence policy and available structural funds. There are also private investment opportunities. However, as we see, there still is a gap between the EU funding and private funding that needs to be filled, and 3C's initiative seems to be a potential answer, at least partial answer, to that challenge. Why this exact solution to this challenge? Strategically, it would be complementary to the EU efforts, and with the US support, investment and participation. That is for us politically one of the key reasons why Latvia is so interested in the 3C's initiative, because it also brings US as our strategic partner in much more in our economic life as it has been before, and it also ties the US into our infrastructure development projects, and it's really important to have the partners connected also economically. We are therefore very happy about the resolution that was passed yesterday in the House of Representatives supporting the 3C's initiative unanimously, bipartisan co-sponsorship. So we are looking quite hopefully at very soon US involvement also through investment. When we look back a little bit at the 3C's initiative history, the first summit was in 2016. It has taken 4 years to get where we are now. We just had a summit in Tallinn just a month ago, and that was a stock-taking summit basically, and we have achieved quite a lot. Our president participated in the summit. Our government has assigned a 3C's initiative coordinator, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Rinkevich. He is supported by interinstitutional working group that I chair, and we come together from a range of ministries and state institutions, including Altum, including Latvian Development Investment Agency, to coordinate and to make sure that Latvia's interests are represented and furthered through the 3C's initiative process. At the heart, as we see it, of the 3C's initiative project is the investment fund. We have joined, Latvia has joined the investment fund. It is commercially viable, and that would actually give the money, give the investment needed to the projects. About that, I will let Reinis speak, but from the government side, apart from the political strategic importance, investment fund is the heart of the project. Right now, to conclude my short opening statement, right now is the time to move the 3C's initiative projects from plans to reality. And what I'm looking for today is that if we can entice any of you to think about the 3C's initiative investment fund as a potential investment vehicle, And if only one idea is born out of today's meeting, that would be a great success, and that would be a win. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pelsch. Our next panelist is Carl Alto, Managing Director of the Joint Baltic American National Committee, or JBANC for short, which is a Washington, D.C.-based Baltic nonprofit. Among its key successes in the past has been its significant role in advocating for the Baltic countries' accession to NATO, and more recently, Magnitsky sanctions against human rights violations and violators specifically in Russia. Mr. Alto, as its managing director, has been a familiar face for more than 20 years in Washington, D.C. to members of Congress, as well as to Baltic parliamentarians. So I'm very grateful that he can join us from Washington, D.C., and perhaps give us also some fresh news straight from Congress regarding the latest resolution. Please, Carl.
Thank you, Mārtiņš, for the too kind introduction, and I want to thank you and the World Federation for hosting this again. Congratulations on doing such a great job, and to also the AmCham Latvia and others who have supported this venture, and for the opportunity to talk today. Yes, it's morning in Washington, and what I wanted to do in my introduction is just to give perhaps look at three aspects. Just a brief introduction, background, perhaps a little bit of history, and then perhaps more of the Baltics view. But since I'm based here in Washington, and as Mārtiņš had said, that we deal with the U.S. Congress and administration, maybe more of a U.S. angle on this as well, which I'm sure Ambassador Morningstar will follow up on with more detail and depth. But if you remember, just looking at the history of 3 Cs, the whole concept actually comes from the old Polish-inspired Intermarium, which connects the Baltic, Black, and Adriatic. But back in the day when that was proposed under Pilsudski, about 100 years ago, there were fewer countries because countries were bigger then, and also the Intermarium countries included Finland because it was also part of that connection, and so just projecting into today, we see that the Baltics are all actively, including Poland and other Baltic countries. On one side of the Baltic, we can't do it without connectivity to the Nordic countries, and that includes transportation, communications, energy links to the Baltics from Finland to Sweden, Denmark, obviously all very important to this. So just to keep that in mind. Also, at the time when the Intermarium was proposed, that there was a desire to involve places like Ukraine and well, what is now Belarus. So looking ahead, I think this is further down the road, but we together in Central and Eastern Europe, with the United States support, I think we like to see countries with shared values included, because the energies and links that those countries have had traditionally during the Soviet years and past are now reorienting also, that there are different opportunities. So I just wanted to keep that in mind as well. Andres had mentioned the recent 3C summit in Tallinn, and that was a great step forward, I thought. And we see more interest and talk and action on developing digital infrastructure, digital ideas, and of course in the U.S. too, 5G is an increasingly important thing. But we have to remember that security of those networks is very important, and I think that's an overriding issue for the 3 Cs and looking at the future. Looking at the joint statement from the summit in Tallinn, there was the concept of smart connectivity, which I think means the security of those networks looking forward. And there is already infrastructure in the Baltics, as we know, from the LNG terminal to the electricity interconnectors, future electric grid connectivity, storage of gas, and so forth. I was reminded also, as I'm looking through some old newspapers, for another project that, and keeping in mind Baltic projects like Rail Baltica. When Lennart Meri was the president of Estonia, he had gone to the rail junction in Tapa, Estonia. This is about 15 or 20 years ago, and had gone up to the ticket counter and asked the person there, the salesperson, for a train ticket to Paris. Meri had as a boy, lived in Paris as his father was an Estonian diplomat. Well, the lady behind the desk looked at him and thought, well, he's really crazy. It's not possible. but now we're at a point, a generation later almost, where we can see that is becoming more and more a reality. Not just travel, easier travel to other parts of Europe via rail or road, but also we see that strategically very important is that the connections are secure and stable, so that there can be troop movements across borders as well, and that is an important aspect of making sure that these connections are secure. The investment fund, as Andres had mentioned, also very important for the development of the fund. It's great about the U.S. pledge of $1 billion, and we'll see possibly in just a few weeks, if I understand correctly, a large tranche of that already being realized. And it's great to see that 9 of the 12 members of the initiative are also investing in this, from Poland's development fund to the Amber Infrastructure Group's support for the project too. So that is all important for taking the next step, leading to the summit in Bulgaria next year, to move forward. And certainly here in Washington, again, that we want to see the U.S. remain engaged and interested in this. The resolution that passed in the U.S. House yesterday, it was bipartisan. There was a lot of interest. There was support from the House leadership, minority or majority leader Steny Hoyer, for instance, and the leaders of the House Foreign Affairs Committee also weighed in and supported this. And since we work very closely with the House Baltic Caucus, which has over 70 members currently, it was good to see a good proportion, over a third of the members of the caucus, be co-sponsors for the resolution. This was just the first step, because in working with, and it should be mentioned also that without the help of Congresswoman Marcy Kaptur, who introduced the resolution, and Congressman Adam Kinzinger from the Republican side, that their help has been really great and instrumental for moving this forward, and also projecting forward into the next session of Congress, which begins in January, because there are plans for even more U.S. Focus on the project and support through a Transatlantic Telecommunications Security Act, which I understand may possibly be introduced in September, and focusing more on the fifth generation networks. And that certainly has been a U.S. focus for the administration, and I think will remain so under the Biden administration. So very optimistic at this point. It's good to see all the progress. Can't see everybody out in the audience today, but I'm glad you're all here, and looking forward to my co-panelists and the discussion afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you, Carl, and thank you for that update from Washington on the latest support for the 3 Cs initiative. Our third panelist is Ambassador Richard Morningstar, who has a long and distinguished career in the U.S. Foreign Service, including as U.S. Ambassador, serving as U.S. Ambassador to the European Union, and in a separate assignment as U.S. Ambassador to Azerbaijan. He was also the Secretary of State's Special Envoy for Eurasian Energy, and he also has extensive experience in the private sector as an attorney and as a business executive, especially in the energy sector. Ambassador Morningstar is the founding chairman of the Global Energy Center and board director at the Atlantic Council. So to offer us perhaps a deeper perspective on the U.S. interest in the 3 Cs initiative, I hand the microphone over to Ambassador Morningstar. Sir.
Well, thank you very much, Mārtiņš, and I'm thrilled to be part of this panel. I only wish that I could be with you in Riga because I believe Riga is truly one of the most beautiful cities in Europe. I might also say that being at the Atlantic Council gives me, I think, a special connection to the 3 Cs initiative. The specific 3 Cs initiative, I know the history of the Intermarium that Carl talked about, but the specific initiative grew out of a proposal from the Atlantic Council called the North Sea Connection Completing Europe, which we put forward in 2014. General Jim Jones, former National Security Advisor and Commandant of the Marine Corps, and Ian Brzezinski and Polish colleagues put it forward as a way to do in effect what the 3 Cs initiative is now doing. I don't want to repeat everything that Carl has said, because I think he really very nicely spelled out the 3 Cs initiative from the American standpoint. One thing I would say, maybe the most important thing, Carl's already talked about it, is the bipartisan support in the United States for 3 Cs. The congressional resolution, the House resolution that Mr. Pelch and Carl have already talked about, really, I don't think you can overestimate the importance of that resolution. It was unanimous. Think about that. Unanimous in our House of Representatives. In a situation where there is so much divide right now in the United States, where it seems like Republicans and Democrats can't agree on anything right now, that this resolution was able to be passed unanimously, which shows that bipartisan support. It received, the 3 Cs initiative received the full support of the Trump administration, and I fully expect that, and know actually, that the 3 Cs initiative will have the full support of the Biden administration. And I think it's important to remember how close President-elect Biden feels to the countries in the region. And I know that you will see tremendous support from the new administration, again, on a bipartisan basis. I think it's worth thinking a little bit about why is that the case? Why has this received such bipartisan support? First of all, I think there's a tremendous solidarity between the United States and all of the countries in the region for various reasons. One, there's a huge diaspora from the region in the United States, the Latvian American Association being just one example. A tremendous feelings of support for the region as it broke loose from the Iron Curtain. So there's just visceral, real support for this region. I've been involved mostly from the energy standpoint. I think all three aspects of the 3 Cs are critically important. But just from an energy security standpoint, the building of the interconnections, alternative supplies of gas, like LNG, which is so important to the Baltics, helps create a feeling of independence in the region and makes it very difficult for Russia, for example, to exert too much influence. And the development of a competitive and transparent energy market, of which the 3 Cs initiative, is contributing, is truly important. Another factor that I think and why there's a lot of support is the whole notion of regional cooperation. I think sometimes in the United States, people think of the countries in the region as being monolithic. They're not monolithic. There are lots of differences among the 3 Cs members, but this is an area where these countries can work together with a common purpose to help ensure the independence of these countries. I think what Carl said about other countries' involvement is also important, that Ukraine and Moldova be involved, countries in the Balkans. I think a country like Greece should be involved because Greece can be a real significant route into the region for energy. So the regional cooperation aspect, I think, is really important. Another point I think that's important to emphasize is this must be done in coordination with Brussels. I think there was a bit of a feeling in Brussels at the beginning that this was sort of an us versus them kind of situation. It can't be that. Brussels has to be involved. I think it's obvious from any number of standpoints, including financing and politically as well. I think Germany has to be involved. This is a real opportunity for Germany, which, it's been so controversial within this region, the Nord Stream pipeline. I think it's important that Germany step up to the plate with respect to LNG imports and participating directly in 3 Cs and 3 Cs projects. I think that really is important. Final area that I guess I would talk about, and Carl mentioned it, is the whole financing point. Our new U.S. Development Finance Corporation, which is the successor to OPIC, the Overseas Private Investment Corporation, has $1 billion that's been appropriated for projects in the region and is planning on making a direct $300 million investment in the 3 Cs Investment Fund, which is, I think, really important. Sometimes the U.S. says, we say a lot of stuff, and but I think this is where I think we're putting money where our mouth is, and I think it's important. I think it's also important when you talk about $1 billion in investment, it doesn't need to be direct investment. That investment can be leveraged into much greater amounts of money by project finance guarantees, which would make projects more bankable. So again, I think that's important, and I think it's important also that it'll help to get matching funds from other European entities. And just very briefly, I think the Baltic projects are critically important, including in Latvia with respect to LNG facilities. And I think as important as anything is the whole issue of electricity synchronization, which hopefully will be complete by 2025, basically to connect the Baltic countries to the European grid. So all of these things are really important. And again, I couldn't be happier than to be here now, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Towards the end of the Ambassador's comments, he was talking about finance, and that's a great segue to our fourth panelist, Mr. Reinis Bērziņš, who is the chairman of Altum, Latvia's state-owned development finance institution. I'm going to invite him to join us here on stage. He's our only in-person guest. Mr. Bērziņš is also a board member of the 3Cs Investment Fund, which was mentioned in a couple of the other panelists' comments, which is the fund that, as I understand it, is going to be co-financing or helping to finance many of these projects. Mr. Bērziņš also has broad experience as a board member of La Telecom, as well as the Latvian Guarantee Agency. And as I understand it, Altum was really at the vanguard in terms of building early awareness of the 3Cs initiative early on. And I'll hand the microphone over to Mr. Bērziņš, who can explain or share with us a little bit about the role of public and private sector finance in the 3Cs initiative. Sir.
Thank you, Mārtiņš, very much indeed. So I'm so glad to be here in this conference, and unfortunately we cannot see all of those people who are currently following us also via internet, but I guess this is not coincidence that also Altum is here, and will elaborate more about Latvia's position regarding the finance part. So what actually we are all about? So basically, in one sentence, Altum is a Latvian development institution, like, I don't know, in Estonia it could be Kredex, in Finland, Finveira, in Poland, BGK. So, and time after time, several institutions also ask us, can Latvia will perhaps participate in one of those funds which sometimes are created somewhere? And there was always some reasons why we didn't went to those funds. But this time it was vice versa. Because when I first heard about this fund, it answered actually several questions which were quite important for us. First thing is that it's a reliable partners, right? Because also, I guess nowadays also in Latvia we know that either you are dealing with finances, not only things should be like well financed, but also you should know with whom you are investing with, right? So investors, all those state institutions and also states, so we were very glad about this geopolitical vector. The second thing is, usually Altum is about SMEs, getting finances to SMEs, but when we are allowed to do something with the wider projects, we see that there is very often cross-border vector, and we saw that this is a great thing, that in this particular fund, cross-border projects are in the great importance. That was the second thing. And the third thing is also, Mr. Ambassador also mentioned a word, bankable. This is a huge thing for us, because everything we do is bankable. We are also an institution which basically don't provide grants, almost in none of our programs. This is a very exceptional thing for us, a grant. Usually we work with financial instruments. Financial instruments, in simple words, is either loan or guarantee, but basically something which is bankable. So all those three things were answered, so that was the thing why we actually were among very first, who already in 2018 went to the Bucharest. Among 6 countries, we were the ones who put our signature. I went there to sign memorandum of understanding for this creation of this fund. And what we also saw that actually those promises are being kept, because also a fund was created in 2019 by our Polish colleagues from BGK and also Romanian colleagues. And we saw that also it's respected that also it takes into account how big is economy in particular country, how big could be commitment. Of course, commitment from BGK will not be the same for Altum, right? Particularly for the reason that we suggested that we will put our money, our company's money, our profit to this fund. So those 20 million, it's a huge profit for us, right? So, and it was also respected, and all those things were answered, and this year actually was a turning point. I also went to Washington, and then we created mini conference. We got the positive government decision, and here we are in autumn. In September, it was officially commitment made to this fund. We got EC decision. Everything we do need to be approved by the EC decision, and now it's actually all about real projects. Now it's all about the real projects, and what I could like to perhaps elaborate in those couple of minutes left, more from my side, is that we are very glad about this latest thing, because starting from September, when we officially joined to this great initiative, we have already 9 interested parties, 9, and it's huge for Latvia, such a not so big economy, right? And all those projects are taking activities in all those 3 fields. Either it's digitalization, or energy, or infrastructure, and we are very glad that those are major projects. If we are talking, there was also, I guess, Carl, who mentioned Rail Baltic, right? It's also a project who are interested here. And of course, I guess we know what is Rail Baltic all about, and most of the money will come from European Commission, of course. But several activities might happen or not. Either one particular country will find some more resources and will build some kind of activity. And in this case, there is Salaspils logical center, which might perhaps take place in Latvia, and it will happen. Then most likely also with the great support of this fund, because those talks have been already took basically place between Rail Baltic and also Amber. Also Amber was mentioned, right? So also here I can say that we are very strong working together with Amber. Rail Baltic. Then from state companies it's also LMT, major telecommunication company, mobile telecommunication company, and they will offer most likely something which smart lighting systems, which were also something which Amber was interested in. Then we can talk also about state-owned company Latvian Roads, because everyone also now listens that there might be also a situation when the money for the roads is getting less and less, right? And there is a lot of talks about possible PPP projects, and there might be some solution for that, particularly in Via Baltica context, so Latvian roads. And if we are turning on the private sector, I guess several already speakers mentioned LNG, so that is one of those projects which are also interested here and which have those talks about Amber, and among those 9 projects is LNG. Then there is a project called La Flora, which is also it's already existing a company, and they would like to create green energo-efficient field actually near Jelgava. Project is bigger, but Amber is interested on that part where there might be connection with energy, new energy, renewable energy creation, windmills. Several also projects in digitalization. One company, unfortunately, I cannot name currently. I don't have this permission, but there is talk about fiber network and perhaps some harmonization, some merger between different countries in fiber network. So we can see that it's quite a big already number of those projects currently in those couple of months. And so that's actually very important for us, because we suggested already from 2018 that we need to step in, and I guess perhaps the awareness was not so big. Now it's getting better, and we are very glad on the current situation. So, and as a summary, we are very satisfied with 2020, have turned from our dreams about participation in the fund to already real talks which takes in autumn between private sector, state sector, and Amber from the other side. Thank you.
Thank you, Reinis. I'm going to start off with a few questions of my own, but I'm going to remind all of our participants to send me your questions via our Facebook link and also our website, and I'll relay those via this tablet here. Let me just start off with maybe a bit of a cynical cap. I think all of you, to one degree or another, mentioned the word cooperation and the importance of cooperation. But when I look at projects like Rail Baltica, or if I look at areas such as energy or even the digital domain, I see examples where perhaps cooperation hasn't been so great. There have been some hiccups with Rail Baltica. I believe Hungary has been one of the few countries in Europe that has endorsed Huawei's 5G solution, and correct me if I'm wrong, but and then in the area of energy, right, we've seen Germany's support for Nord Stream 2, which is not exactly in the interest of the Baltics. So why should we be sanguine or optimistic that the 3 Cs initiative will be successful in its efforts to coordinate these projects and the realization of those projects? And this question is to any one of the panelists, so please raise your hand if you're virtual so I can see who I should be looking at, who wants to take a stab at addressing that. Mr. Ambassador. Oh, your microphone.
Sorry. I think that you raise a real issue. You know, back in the first few years of the first Obama term, I was Eurasian energy envoy, but that included Europe. And I was involved in the Baltics, the so-called BMIP program. And there were issues between, even within the Baltic countries. I think we helped them, work together to resolve some of these issues. That's what I meant when I said, these countries are not monolithic, but there are common interests that do need to be worked through, and we have to keep working on that. You mentioned Germany and Nord Stream. That's why I also said during my comments that Germany has to play. I mean, can't force them to play, but they certainly should play a very important role in the 3 Seas initiative. And that's because of their support for Nord Stream 2. Whether or not Nord Stream 2 happens or not, the key issue and why the 3 Seas initiative is so important is that by taking the actions that are necessary to build the infrastructure, to develop alternative sources of energy, that's what will create a competitive and transparent market in Central and Eastern Europe, and whether or not, and the Baltics, and whether or not Nord Stream 2 happens or not, it will force Gazprom to act competitively and not be able to use gas as a political tool. So I think that I appreciate the points that you made, but it also goes to point out how important the 3 Seas initiative really is to the region.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Anyone else on the panel want to address this question of how realistic is this cooperation when we've seen other examples or we see areas where there might be conflict or tension?
I'd like to cut in a little bit on this one. When we speak about cooperation, for example, between the Baltic countries on Rail Baltica or any other project, of course, there are issues, there are differences, and there are hiccups in the process, as was mentioned. But all of these things come from the fact that there is cooperation and that we actually do very ambitious projects together. We have totally no hiccups with all kinds of countries that we don't cooperate with in the matter of such a magnitude or such closeness. So actually, yes, we of course have issues, but I believe that they mostly come from the closeness of cooperation, and of course, the closer you cooperate, the more opportunities for disagreements you have. Regarding Nord Stream 2, Latvia's position has been well known, and we don't hide it. We are against it. We do not support the construction of Nord Stream 2, and the main reason, apart from all the security challenges and everything, is that the basic premise of diversification is not there, because it still would come from the same source. So with all that effort, we do not, as Europe, get diversification of energy sources. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Rein.
Yeah, just also wanted to perhaps add to what also Mr. State Secretary said, and actually all the compliments also to Andris for the way how actually also in Latvia this work takes place by discussing those possible projects, and it's really looking on not because something we would like to do, but just to have those projects putting forward which are really as I said, cross-border and also bankable. So really thanks also because he's chairing this also this committee, and this is very also important when we are looking how we are looking on those Latvian projects. But those practical things which I wanted to add also is like despite all those things which also was said, and I will not repeat that about this cooperation, there are also some other things, like for example, if we would have in Via Baltica like a bigger road which go through all those countries, right? And if you, for example, also do something in, I don't know, Latvia, for example, and you are like doing that thing only in Latvia, it also, this could be a project which also should be implemented if it's bankable and so on, because that Latvian part actually is a part of wider road of which go through all of those countries, right? So actually we should also look on those type of projects. This is one thing. And the second thing is also there are also several of those possible projects where should be like merger of assets. As I said, like also we have one particular client, unfortunately I cannot name that particular company, it's from private sector, but there might be also some how to say, consolidation of fiber network assets throughout several countries, and the bigger company with synergies could be created, and I guess this is also one of those aspects, like a merger of different assets. But of course, that was more besides everything which was already said about this closer cooperation, which should come as a really like a target to obtain that, yeah.
If I could continue this line of thought, I want to bring in the topic of China. And I think, Reinis, you were in China at some point not too long ago. As we all know, we've seen China's influence in the world grow in recent years along with its economic success. And as I understand it, China has some pretty big ambitions in Europe as well with its not 3 Cs initiative, but its Belt and Road initiative and its Silk Road initiative. I can't remember all these initiative names, but I know that China is offering very attractive financing for infrastructure projects and has offered to come and play a big role in building things out, developing partnerships. To what degree we need to think about China in the 3 Cs initiative question? Are they a competitor? Will they be upset that there is this regional or more local effort to cooperate? What about the China factor here? And Reinis, I don't know, you were in China, so maybe you have an insider's view there.
I was there, yeah, and back in 2016 I also went to Beijing and Shanghai, and there was a big also meeting here in Latvia, also 16+1 on that time, I guess now it's like 17+1 and so on. But anyway, so also there was a possibility to also join to the fund very similar like this. We also looked on those conditions at the very beginning of my sentence, of my, I have to say, of the things which I gave as the first statements. I already mentioned several principles which were on higher importance for us. Let's say like this fund didn't give us all those responses we awaited. So I guess that would be enough if comparing with this fund, and this fund is really something we were hoping to join, and something like this. And here we can see all of those answers which I already gave, like about this reliable investors, cross-border projects, and very important for us also was bankable, bankable factor.
So that's the Latvian perspective, but do you worry about China maybe flexing its muscles even more to try to insist on its projects or its financing packages to be the preferred choice in developing the region?
I want not to comment nothing about China at this stage. Perhaps also some other colleagues. From my perspective, I guess we have very good tempo now in 2020 by creation of this fund. It's getting real. We still have a lot of challenges. Let's think more about how to consolidate our countries, also geopolitical partners and so on. I guess that could be an answer. Don't think so much about what this other big country is doing currently.
I saw Mr. Pelsch smiling there for a moment. Perhaps he could share his perspective on the China question.
Thank you. Reinis came through as a true diplomat on this one. So kudos to you. Well, regarding the China investment in the region, whether China would be interested investing in the regional infrastructure sure, it is interested in investing globally all over the world. Also in Eastern and Central Europe. In the Latvian case, we have been, and in most cases actually in Central and Eastern Europe, we have been very adamant with our Chinese counterparts all along that we are open for cooperation, but we have to base that on the existing EU rules and regulations regarding not only investment, but then competition regarding tenders and everything. So it's not Chinese money and by extension Chinese companies would build something. So that's one part, and it has to be commercial, and it has to be competitive, and it has to be reciprocal in a way that China and EU in general are following similar rules of allowing each other's companies to operate, which totally is not the case at the moment, and EU has been quite vocal regarding this point over the last year. So yeah, that's the reason why we, at least in Latvia, do not have any current projects regarding Chinese investment in infrastructure.
Thank you. Mr. Ambassador. Thank you, Mr. Pelch.
Yeah, I think Mr. Pelch's points are extremely well taken. China's going to be there. We're going to have to deal with China. I think the U.S. and our European allies and partners, particularly in this new administration coming in, have to work together to have a common strategy on dealing with China. I think the most important point is that when you're dealing with Western investment and Western countries, you know what you're getting, and you know that there's going to be rule of law and so on. And in dealing with China, it is so important to know what you're getting yourself into. And so following the rules, as Mr. Pelch indicated, and following EU rules and regulations are really important. China, for example, a Chinese company is operating, I think, the port of Piraeus in Greece. There's been a lot of question about that. And Greece says, oh, no, yeah, they're running it, but, we have total control. They can't force us to do things. We have to make sure that that's the case. I can remember back when I was in the government and going, for example, to Turkmenistan, where China financed a major pipeline to bring gas from Turkmenistan to China. The leadership at one point, and this is going back several years, maybe even 10 or 12 years ago, was saying, oh, what did we get ourselves into? We didn't realize that we even had to pay them back. And they had to buy their own gas from the pipeline. And it was Chinese workers who were the ones who came into Turkmenistan to build the pipeline. So there are all sorts of issues, and I think it's harder for some of the more developing countries to deal with it. But in Europe, there's the opportunity to make sure that all the rules and regulations are followed.
Thank you. I want to get to some of the questions on the tablet here, which a lot of them are focused around kind of the practical side of things. But one real quick question specifically for Carl. With your kind of view to Congress, and now we've got potentially, the Biden administration coming in with their priorities. What's your view on kind of where the U.S. focus is going to be in the next 6 to 12 months? Should we be worried that I know that Mr. Ambassador was optimistic about the incoming administration, but kind of what's your take in Washington D.C. as far as where is the Congress looking right? Where is Congress looking right now, and will they be distracted with potentially domestic priorities over international projects like the 3 Cs initiative? What's your take on that?
Yeah, certainly the new administration's got a lot to tackle when it comes in, starting with COVID and the economy, the but I think that, as we've heard from many of the speakers, that there is great potential here. I think the Biden administration and people working who may be working in the administration have high hopes for this. As the ambassador mentioned, just because we have many like-minded partners and allies through many institutions, we've been working together for years. So we know what we're getting into. And I think it's a win-win for the Biden administration, and I think that they would look forward to getting back into good, active, positive cooperation with allies there, and then maybe just look from our perspective. This is an American constituent perspective regarding China. Of course, there are practical reasons for engaging with China, economic reasons, and so on and so forth. But you can't not look at lack of perhaps rule of law in many areas. Look at the human rights situation. There's a lot of baggage. So I think that the Biden administration and Congress will be quite active in engaging and working on these relationships. And this is just a good example of an initiative that makes a lot of sense for many reasons.
Great.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I can only reinforce what Carl is saying. There are going to be exceptional people in the Biden administration. The Biden administration is going to want to work to rebuild the transatlantic relationship, also emphasize the relationship with the three C's countries, and that you can just look back historically at the huge support that President-elect Biden has always given to the countries in the region. And I know he's well aware of the Three C's initiative and and I'm sure will support it. Okay,
great. Thank you. I want to, again, as I said, turn to the practical side of things, and I have some questions here, I think, from the private sector as far as can you provide concrete examples? And I think, Ainis, you mentioned 9 projects currently, but the question is, can you provide concrete examples of projects anticipated to benefit Latvia and or the Baltics from the Three C's initiative? And what is the timing of such projects? How can Latvian business be expected to benefit? So the what's in it for me question, classic.
Right, so yeah. So as I said, I can just once again say those projects which now are taking place in Latvia, which are like submitting. I'm not saying that they will for 100% will gain these finances. I'm just saying those first couple of months how they are looking, and they are looking very good. First of all, let's say once again, Rail Baltica. We know all this big project. Most of the money comes from European Commission, but there are several things which might happen in particular countries if there will be more finances for particular projects. In this case, Salaspils Logistics Center as one example. Second thing, I also mentioned one concrete project which is already actually signed NDA with Amber, and it's La Flora, who signed this windmill project. This is like another example, private sector, energy sector. Third thing could be like from LMT, there is initiative that there might be a project connecting with the intelligent street lighting, smart lighting basically. Again, totally different story. LNG, it was already mentioned here. We know that story. I will not elaborate once again. Then there is a project which deals with Latvian roads, possibility to basically to put several like roads together and create a big like PPP project. So I guess, as I said, 9 projects altogether, different stages, from just very good ideas to quite advanced projects where there is already calculated IRR, internal rate of return, and so on. So I guess how actually also Latvian projects could start those negotiations, either they turn to Amber directly, or they go through the Altum, and then we are creating those conversations, and then we are basically helping to have those presentations. But I guess it's a real starting point at the moment.
Okay, and as a practical matter, if among our participants we have Latvian companies or maybe U.S. companies who want to get involved, have something to propose, is Altum, is the Foreign Ministry open to proposals and suggestions? Can people reach out and say, my company does XYZ, I'd like to get involved, I have a proposal? Or is this kind of all happening behind closed doors among agencies?
It's just transparent as described. Yeah. And actually it's exactly as you also described, right? That there is some kind of project who would like to present themselves. They can go directly to the Amber and do that. No problem with that. If they would like to be, like, have to say, use some kind of sparring just to show what's there, basically some good or perhaps not so good currently, how we could perhaps present something, then they turn to Altum. We are helping with giving advice to anyone who attracts it. So I guess this is the good way how to start. Just go to the Altum. There are several guys in Altum who will deal with those presentations, and we will arrange those meetings with Amber in, I guess, in weeks. Amber's for 100% what we can say, they are very, have to say, open-minded. In very short days you can find a time where we can arrange this telephone conference, so I guess similarly we will continue.
Okay. In the 2 minutes that we have left, I want to talk about, actually, I've got a couple of questions here on the telecom side. Carl, one of them is specifically directed to you in terms of 5G from the U.S. to Latvia, and the question is that going to be with all 5 telecoms or only 1 or 2? And the question is coming from John Beauchamp, who I don't know perhaps is familiar to you.
Hi, John. I think we just met. I really can't say. I'm not haven't looked at any of those details.
Okay, that one might be too specific then. But right. Mr. Ambassador, you mentioned the Telecom Act. Can you go into a little bit more detail in terms of what opportunities there might be there from either the Latvian perspective or the U.S. perspective for participants who might want to get involved? Your microphone again, sir.
I think actually Carl mentioned it. Again, I will plead almost ignorance because I'm really involved from the energy standpoint at the Global Energy Center, so I really don't feel equipped to answer that question.
Okay.
As Carl also said, a little too specific for me right at the moment. Although the 5G issue is obviously an important issue, and that it is important for any number of security reasons that that raises the whole Huawei question, and that I don't want to get into it more than that.
But it sounds like LNG has certainly got legs as far as there are things happening there with the U.S. exporting LNG now, and certain projects in the Baltics being kind of aligned with that. Can one of you share perhaps, again, maybe that perspective of what are some of the opportunities there in terms of what are the projects that are currently underway that are part of that broader 3 Cs initiative view?
Well, maybe I would just add a personal note there. I know that America, the U.S. has become an LNG exporter for the first time just recently, and because of the new licenses that have been granted. It was interesting to go about a month or so ago to the Chesapeake Shore, in Maryland, and to see, I think it's called Cove Point, where there's a facility and had a big ship, I guess, loading up gas to take to foreign ports. And I think there's a terminal in Louisiana. I think, Ambassador, you'll know more about this than I do. Right. The U.S. is now exporting gas for the first time, and they're real player on the market, and instead of just being an importer. So it's we've seen some real game changes here in the last few years.
Well, maybe I can add on to that. I think that it will be very important to continue for the U.S. to continue its ability to export LNG, and that and certainly I've argued and would certainly argue and make the points to the new administration, which I think they understand, that from a national security standpoint, it is absolutely critical. It's critical that U.S. LNG be available, LNG from other places as an alternative to Russian gas. And I think what was learned in your neighboring country of Lithuania was that when they built the Klaipėda terminal, and even when they announced it, Russia immediately reduced their gas price by about 25%. So what's most important is that LNG continue to be available as an alternative to the region. I think those national security implications are well understood by those who are going to be involved in the new administration, and I think you'll continue to see support for exporting LNG to Europe. I know there's been some, and other places. I know that during the campaign there was a lot of talk about fracking, and Trump accused Biden of saying that fracking would be banned. He has made very clear that he is not going to ban fracking, and I think exports will also continue to take place.
Okay, well, with that, unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap up our discussion. The hour has gone by very quickly, and it's clearly a big topic that we could talk much more in depth on. So I want to thank all of our panelists, Mr. Ambassador, Mr. Pelch, Mr. Alto, as well as here in the studio, Mr. Bērziņš. For our participants, if you're interested in learning more about the initiative and just getting some of the basic facts about it, there is an official website, 3 Seas, SEAS.eu, and I imagine all the latest news will be shared there as well. So with that, I will say goodbye to our panelists virtually and goodbye to Mr. Bērziņš, and again, thank you.